Oh, naso. So we'll have one session, but I'd like to just connect a couple of dots before we go in. Those will be fairly short. You recall a central theme from, was it last night? I think it was. Within the Buddhist view, why do we suffer? Why do we suffer? This whole theme, core theme, that we find especially in Mahayana Buddhism of dualistic grasping. This reification, this grasping to ourselves, the subject, the person is really here, over here, inside. And then we find the echo, then what's out there is really out there, existing from its own side. So that's dualistic grasping. If we hold this in mind as a hypothesis that can be investigated, it's not just something to believe in, then if we come back to metaphysical realism, which is a very respectable theory, I disagree with it, but it's certainly very intelligible and compelling to many, many people. But metaphysical realism says there really is a universe out there, absolutely objectively, it's waiting to be discovered, and then mapped, represented. And then, apart from the materialists, everybody else believes, I think, the mind is as real as it gets. Your emotions, what's more real than your emotions? And your desires, and your hopes, your fears, your perceptions, your dreams. I mean, why should that be any less real than anything else? The subjective mind, it's the most intimate aspect of our whole existence here. And so it's very easy, very natural to think that, well, there's also a real mind in here. A mind in here, existing in and of itself. And the Madhyamaka perspective on that view is if anything exists by its own inherent nature, it's utterly unrelated to anything else, and it's unknowable. This is Kant also, the whole notion of Ding an sich. If there were Ding an sich, if there were things out there that existed in and of themselves, they would be unknowable. That's pretty deep insight. Some definite similarities with Nagarjuna. But I'm going to come to a very simple point here. Rather than poking my elbow into materialism again, let's simply look at metaphysical realism. That perhaps there's a very good reason why in the most cutting-edge physics right today, among those brilliant people, and we're going to see a lot more, what's really out there is we don't know. What we do know is things that we thought were really out there aren't. A lot of consensus there. A lot of consensus. But okay, that's not really out there, that's not really out there. And what's really out there, what's in the fundamental nature of reality? And the most brilliant ones are pretty much saying we don't know, as Marcelo Gleiser, the Brazilian-American physicist, commented. It's very honest, and Sean Carroll. We don't, what quantum mechanics is the best. What does it say about reality? Don't know. You know, I love that honesty. It's very, very much worthy of respect. And then not solving the nature of mind. What's the nature of the mind? How does it relate to the brain? What's the origins of the mind? Where does your mind come from? Does it really pop out of neurons? Does it come from your mom's egg or your dad's sperm? From DNA? Where do your thoughts come from? Do they come from nothing? Does nothing actually give rise to stuff? That kind of like insults the intelligence, doesn't it? And so when we try to understand the mind as something existing in and of itself, modern science really hasn't come up with the answers. It's not a criticism, it's a fact. Donald Hoffman said as much. We don't know. We don't know the nature of consciousness, its origins. Don't know the nature of the mind, how it influences the brain, how the brain influences the mind. Don't know. Maybe there's a very good reason for that. And that is if we are assuming that there's a world out there existing in and of itself, Madhyamaka says is unknowable. Because it would be independent, unrelated to anything else. And doesn't even exist. And if there were a mind that were posited as being inherently existent subjectively, that would be unrelated to anything else. And unknowable, and it doesn't exist. So maybe the reason that modern science doesn't know the nature of the objective world is an objective world existing in and of itself doesn't exist. And the reason why the mind scientists haven't figured out how the mind exists in and of itself is because the mind doesn't exist in and of itself. Maybe that's why they don't know anything, because there's nothing to know. This is not nihilism. It's saying all the juice is in between. All the juice is in the interrelationship, the entanglement, the codependent arising of objects arising relative to subjects, subjects arising relative to objects. But if you try to isolate the object in and of itself, you don't find it, you don't know anything about it. Try to isolate it and understand the subjective mind in and of itself. You can't find it, you don't know it. And so maybe there's a very good reason why we don't know about the nature of the mind or the nature of the absolutely objective universe. because the mind doesn't exist in and of itself, and nor does the universe out there. But in between, there's an enormous amount of knowledge. If you thought at any point I was simply deprecating psychology, I don't. Clinical psychology has healed thousands, if not millions of people from mental diseases. How can one disparage that? I do not. And cognitive psychology, developmental psychology, and so forth, discovered many, many things. I don't doubt that for a second, and it's worthy of respect. But it's not the mind in and of itself, and it's not the objective world in and of itself. It's the world of experience. It's in that interface between the objective, and that's where our knowledge is. Scientific knowledge, contemplative knowledge, it's in the interface. In the pratitya samatpada, codependent arising, all phenomena arising as dependently related events, mutually interdependent. If you try to isolate any one of them as how it really exists, you come up with no knowledge, because it doesn't exist at all. So maybe that's why the materialists don't know anything about the mind or the external world, because the mind is an inherently existent subject thing, doesn't exist, and neither does the objective world. Materialism is a false belief. I'm perfectly competent of that point. Metaphysical realism is a deeper misconception, but that's going to take some careful scrutiny, because it's very compelling. We'll look into that tomorrow. Now we return to practice, and I never want to stray very far away from lucid dreaming, dream yoga, because after all, that's why we're here. And so we've looked at if you have a very excitable mind, a mind that's very easily aroused and gets really, really jazzed up, then you might have a hard time ever having a sustained lucid dream because you get so excited. Covered that, so relaxation. And then you may be in the midst of the dream, and if your mind is unstable, if your attention is unstable, you can either lose your lucidity and keep the dream, keep your lucidity but lose the dream, or lose both, because unstable is just not sustainable. And so therefore we want that stability that you can develop through shamatha to maintain the continuity of lucidity and the dream. And then there's the cherry on the cake, the top of the pyramid. It's the third quality without which the first two really don't have a whole lot of productivity or juice. And that is if you have a very calm and very stable mind, but you're dull for a long period of time, then that's not very useful either, right? Quite clear. Deep sleep, in deep dreamless sleep, your mind is very stable and is very relaxed, but you're not getting much done. And so the third quality then is its clarity, its luminosity, its brilliance, its sharpness, its acuity, its high resolution, its sharp focus, all of the above. Its intensity also. All of those in one bundle, so we'll call that vividness, but it has all those aspects to it. And when your mind is sharp, it's clear, high definition, and so forth, well, these are very sharp minds. They cut through, they can see things that other people can't see, because the mind is so clear, right? And so relating this to, let's just go right to dreams. We've all had dull dreams, I presume, where there's just very low resolution, they're kind of murky and so forth. So you may be relaxed, you may be stable, but some dreams just are not very clear, right? Not much in terms of clarity and luminosity. In other dreams, I'm sure you've had them, I think most of us have, the dreams are so realistic, they're just indistinguishable from what we're experiencing right now. You're dreaming of somebody, you can count the individual hairs on their head, and so forth. And so some dreams are really, really high resolution. If you would like to use the dream and lucid dream as a way of exploring reality from the inside out, by really exploring the mind, the higher resolution, the better. Higher resolution. We think of television screens, I think it's brightness, focus, and high resolution. Are those three? So some screens are quite dull, you want a brighter one. Some kind of fuzzy, not very sharp focus, you want sharp focus. And then the whole deal is how many pixels per square centimeter, something like that, right? High resolution. So the really expensive ones are very high on all three levels, right? They're bright, very focused, and high resolution. You want that. It's cool. That's for televisions and so forth, for computer screens. And how about that also for the three-dimensional space of your awareness when you're having dreams? Wouldn't it be just interesting if you have both the relaxation and stability, but also your awareness of the dream, the appearances arising to your awareness within the dream are just really high resolution? Wouldn't that make for higher quality experiments and observations? And so this is the third quality, it's the peak of the pyramid. I mentioned if you go for stability without relaxation, you're going to get drained, stressed out, burnt out. It's true. There's lots of evidence behind that. And then it does happen on occasion. I won't be very elaborate here, but on occasion it happens that in meditation people may be really pushing the envelope, really striving with really sharp focus, trying to intensify, to sharpen, to bring really vivid attention to whatever they're doing. It happens. Okay? I think if you think about it, there's some traditions that really emphasize that. We understand why. Everything's interesting. I've experienced this, maybe you have as well. But sometimes your mind is just radiant, I mean so sharp, so luminous, that anything is interesting. Like, about 40 years ago I was leading a retreat up in Cumbria. It was a 4 applications of the mindfulness retreat. And I had people, I think it was at least half an hour, just bend their finger in increments and then straighten it out. But really single-pointed attention. And people got it. Oh. Oh, oh, ah. You know, I mean, if you really bring sharp attention, there's nothing boring about crooking. How are you doing that? Tell me exactly, how do you crook your finger? How do you do that? I don't know how to crook my finger. Tell me how. It's stuck. How do I bend my finger? I don't know how to. Can you explain to me how? It's interesting, isn't it? Not if your awareness is dull, everything's boring. Sex is boring, movies are boring, music, food's boring, everything's boring. If you bring a dull quality to the activity, it's all boring. Again, you know? And bring sharp awareness to anything, including breathing. Breathing's interesting. Wow, that last cycle was really cool. I bet another one, oh, here it comes. Oh boy, you know? I'm not kidding. Everything's interesting. The brighter your awareness, the more interesting everything is, including the dullest conversation partner. Really? Oh. That's how you fix a plugged pipe. I'd never really thought of it that way. It's very, very interesting. Oh. And so there it is. It's just a fact. That how interesting things appear to us correlates directly to how much clarity we bring to it. There it is. So, when your mind is very clear, you can be hypersensitive. Emotionally, for example, hypersensitive. The tiniest thing can really trip you and arouse or catalyze a strong emotional response. I remember one woman I met, she was not very mentally stable, but she was in a small class I was teaching, and in one class I didn't look at her. Not purposely, I just didn't look, and she was very upset. You didn't look at me in the whole class. And another time I looked at her, and she said, I didn't like the way you looked at me. There was not a whole lot of wiggle room there. So to say that she was very sensitive is true, not very happy. But there can be so much sensitivity that we become very fragile. And anything can tip us off into strong and, how do you say, quite inappropriate kind of emotional reactions, really trigger us. And so the life can just be exhausting and destabilizing. If there's a lot of vividness, if you have a lot of weight on the top of the pyramid and not much stability underlying that and no sense of relaxation underlying, you'll be like a very tall tree with a very small root system. Timber, fall right over. So this is why, if you like to have sustainable acuity, clarity, vividness, intensity of awareness, if you like sustainability there, you have to have a corresponding degree of stability, composure, calm, inner stillness. And if that's to be stable, there has to be a deeper sense of relaxation. So, I'll quote the Dalai Lama again, is it necessary to have a guru to achieve enlightenment? No, but it can save you a lot of time. So I didn't come here in the role of guru trying to, hey, everybody, I'm your guru, no such thought. But knowing this, these 3 elements and the sequence of them can save you an enormous amount of time. Because the sustainability of stability is extremely useful. The sustainability of a high level of clarity, alertness, perspicacity of awareness can be extremely useful. And so if you understand the pyramid and then you cultivate that gradually and sequentially, you can really bring about some very meaningful change. So this brings us to a third method. In terms of the balances, some things are worth memorizing. The first one is relax more deeply without losing clarity. Not very challenging, easy, definitely doable. The second one, enhance stability without losing relaxation, so you don't just get uptight. And the third one is enhanced vividness. Let's just do that one word for that whole constellation of adjectives or nouns. Enhance the vividness, the acuity, without sacrificing the underlying stability, the composure, the inner calm. And then you have something sustainable. Then to explicitly enhance clarity, vividness, then this really means paying very close attention. Really close attention. And that heightens the pitch. It increases the pitch or the frequency of your attention. And so, it's been known by contemplatives for centuries that if you find your mind getting a bit dull, you'd like to enhance vividness, elevate and narrow the focus of attention. It's a rule of thumb. If you want to stabilize, focus downwards and broaden, stabilizes, enhance clarity, elevate and narrow the focus. Rule of thumb. And so within mindfulness breathing, this brings us to the most classic method in all of Theravada Buddhism. Time-tested, it's brilliant, it's very, really powerful and effective. I practiced it for thousands of hours. And this is following the method you've probably learned from Theravada teachers, and that is practice mindfulness of breathing and attend for the first time to the sensations of the actual passage of the breath. The breath doesn't go to the belly, let alone other body parts. It passes right here at the apertures of the nostrils. So you attend to those sensations of the passage of the breath coming in, going out, which means you're elevating the focus and narrowing the focus. And it's really quite brilliant. But let's just do it and see for ourselves. One more method for calming the compulsive, obsessive flow of involuntary thought and developing sequentially relaxation, stability, and vividness. So let's jump in and see how it goes. What time is your dinner served? Do you know? 6? Okay, then we can go on 10 minutes late, and you won't be late for dinner. We won't insult our food makers. So one more 24-minute session, and then we'll call it an afternoon. Beginning with the step of relaxation, settle your body, speech, and mind in the natural states as we've done before. And when you come to that place of stillness that is relaxed and therefore sustainable, in which the natural clarity of awareness manifests without cultivating it or generating it, awareness by nature is clear. From that stillness then now let's direct the flow of attention in a rather narrow beam to the actual sensations of the passage of the breath over the upper lip or through the apertures of the nostrils, wherever you most distinctly sense the passage of the air. Again, no visualization or cogitation needed, simply look very closely with a witnessing mind. You may note that the air coming in is cooler than the air going out, the air that's gone through the lungs. Now here's something very important. Please do remember it to avoid unnecessary harm. When doing this practice, focus only your mental awareness on the target area, the upper lip or the apertures of the nostrils. Focus the flow of mental awareness single-pointedly there, as continuously as you can. But now, very importantly, keep your eyes utterly disengaged from the meditative practice. Do not look at the target area. Keep your eyes unfocused, soft, relaxed. See that all the muscles around the eyes, the areas between the eyebrows, all of this soft and relaxed, unfocused, just resting. If you do start focusing your eyes on the target area, this will very easily give rise to tension, to headaches, could even become chronic. So please don't do that. Only mental awareness. You may introduce the oscillation, focusing closely, attending very closely during inhalation, continuing the flow of mindfulness as you breathe out, but relaxing deeply as you exhale. Now, two more core elements of the instruction that really empower and refine this practice. With the faculty of mindfulness, we retain the flow of awareness. We bear in mind continuously the meditative object. This is what mindfulness means in Buddhism. It means bearing in mind. As in mind your head, children, mind your manners. Mindfulness is just that. Bearing in mind what you've chosen to attend to. And we're attending to the sensations of the breath in this area. So there's one faculty, we call it mindfulness, or some translate it as recollection. But then there is our capacity for monitoring the flow of attention itself, recognizing quickly when our attention is strayed into distraction, been carried away. We call that excitation. And on the other hand, where the clarity of attention is dimmed, starting to space out or become bored, we'll call that laxity. And the faculty by means of which we detect these aberrations in the flow of attention, we call introspection, because it is specting intro. It is monitoring the flow of mindfulness, recognizing as swiftly as possible whenever either excitation or laxity arises. Recognizing it, we then, with an act of intention, restore the balance. So maintain a continuity of mindfulness of the breathing and as needed, check up, like quality control, on the flow of mindfulness to quickly detect when there's an aberration. You're falling into either excitation or laxity. What to do when you retrospectively note that your attention has wandered, you've been caught up in distraction? What to do? The words of wisdom from many generations of contemplatives is when you first note that your mind has become distracted, let your first response be to relax, to loosen up. And then release your grasping or identification with whatever carried you away. Release. Let it go. And now that you're a free agent, you can direct your attention where you will. Return to the meditative object. So again and again, whenever you find your mind has become distracted, respond in this way, very gentle but persistent. Relax, release, and return. But now and again, the mind may tend also to the other extreme, and that is a loss of clarity, dullness, becoming spaced out, or simply bored. When you see that the clear flow of cognizance has diminished, noting this retrospectively with your faculty of introspection, then refresh your interest, your motivation for engaging in the practice. In other words, start all over again. Refresh. Arouse your interest, your motivation, and then restore the flow of mindfulness on the meditative object. And retain that flow. Refresh, restore, and retain. In this way, like a sailor trimming the sails of his vessel in fluctuating winds, trim the sails of your mind, restoring balance whenever it's lost. as a temporary auxiliary technique. Multiple schools of Buddhism introduce the element in mindfulness of breathing, of counting the breaths, just to help calm the turbulence, the congestion of the conceptual mind. There are various ways of counting. Here's one. Either at the end, the very end of inhalation, just before exhalation begins, or at the very, very end of exhalation, just before the inhalation begins. You choose. But at the end of one of these, mentally and very succinctly count one, a staccato count, one. And then let the breath continue, relaxing as you breathe out, quietly, non-conceptually, gently arousing as you breathe in, non-conceptually. You come to the end of the cycle and you count 2. And in between counts, let your mind be as silent as possible. So these are just punctuation marks in a flow of silent, non-conceptual mindfulness of the flow of the breath. And if the mind does begin to ramble, the counting will be like a speed bump and interrupt that flow of distracting mind wandering, bring you back to the present. So experiment with this, counting just 1 through 10, 1 through 10. Some people find it very helpful. You may want to do this a lot. Others find it not helpful at all. Then don't do it. And others find it helpful on occasion. Experiment for yourself as you sequentially cultivate a sense of ease, stability, and clarity in the mind. Let's continue practicing now in silence. So that's it for shamatha on mindfulness of breathing. And that will bring us to an end today, just 5:35. So let's come back at 7:35 and enjoy your break and your meal. See you then.